If you're just getting started out with Laravel, you might be a little overwhelmed on all the options you have when it comes to choosing a development server. So my goal with this video is to summarize some of those options so you can make an informed decision on which path might be the best for your development needs. Option number one is using PHP's built-in web server. The only prerequisite for this option is that you have PHP already installed on your computer. Assuming you do, within the root of your Laravel project folder, you can simply run the command php artisan serve, and it'll fire up your application via a local IP address. So this is really convenient. It allows you to hit the ground running very quickly. But ultimately, if you're developing multiple applications, you're going to want to have local domains set up for each of those applications, which is not something you get out of the box with artisan serve. You're also not going to get a database system, which is typically something you're going to want as part of your development environment. So all in all, good for quick prototypes, but not a very robust system and something you'll probably quickly grow out of. Option two is Laravel Valet. This is a local development environment specific to Mac users that you manage via command line. Valet is installed using Composer, and it runs a Nginx web server, and every application you run with Valet will have its own .test domain. Like option number one of using PHP's built-in server, Laravel Valet is not going to set you up with the database system, so that is also going to be an additional thing you're going to want to add to your development context. But the upside of Valet is it's designed to be fast and lightweight, doesn't require managing a virtual machine, which is something we're going to see some of the other options do require. Now, option number three is Laravel Herd. This is like Valet, but even easier. Instead of managing it via command line, you have a nice graphical interface for working with it. They give you the option to very quickly create new Laravel applications, or if you have existing applications, you just have to locate them within a designated directory that Laravel Herd is watching, and it'll automatically configure those sites for you, setting them up so they're accessible with .test domains. With a click of a button, you could turn on HTTPS access. Just makes everything really smooth and easy. Now, a downside of Herd, like Laravel Valet and even that built-in PHP server, is you don't have a database system as part of this software. So you will need additional software for that. And if you are working on a Mac, I recommend integrating DB Engine. It's a free program that will get you set up with a MySQL database very quickly. Option number four is Laravel Homestead. This gets us into the territory of virtual machines, which is a more robust solution to development servers where you're basically replicating a whole other computer or server on your system, creating an isolated development environment. When you're working with Homestead, you're actually working with a bundle of technologies. For the virtualization software, you're using something like Parallels or VirtualBox, and you're managing that via a system called Vagrant. And all Homestead is really just a pre-configured Vagrant box that is customized and optimized for Laravel. Now, a downside of something like Homestead is it does require a little bit more advanced setup and configuration. It can also be more resource intensive on your computer. But the upside is that it's going to more closely replicate the production environment where you're going to run your application. And this just ensures consistency so that anything you're doing in your local development environment is going to operate the same as it does in your production environment or your production server. Option number five is Docker, which is very similar to a virtual machine in that you can create these isolated environments where you run your application. The difference is you're not simulating an entire operating system for your environment. Instead, you're creating what is called a container. It's like a lightweight virtual machine. Now, just like virtual machines, though, and something like Laravel Homestead, the advantage we get with Docker is we could very closely replicate our production servers, ensuring that consistency in how our applications are running. The downside is if we compare Docker to something like Laravel Herd or Laravel Valet, it is going to be a little bit more resource intensive, although perhaps not as resource intensive as a full virtual machine. The other downside is just configuration. You have to know how to use Docker to set it up properly to run Laravel. And that brings us actually to option number six, which is Laravel Sail. This is a command line tool that will set up a Docker-based environment for you that's customized to work with Laravel. If you want to work with Docker and Laravel, I definitely recommend checking out Sail. It's just going to streamline the process. Number 7 on our list is the all-in-one server software program Laragon. This is a development program that runs on Windows and makes it easy to get started with Laravel. All you have to do is download the program, and it comes bundled with the software you'll need, including an Apache web server, PHP, and a MySQL database server. The upside of programs like Laragon, they're just very simple and easy to get started with. They're also less resource intensive compared to Docker and virtual machines. The downside is just that it's going to be a little bit harder to make sure that you're replicating the exact server environment that you might be running on production. So just be aware of that. There might be some discrepancies between how your application runs locally and how it runs on production. Last option on our list I'm going to call the AMPs. There's a few different variations of this. We've got XAMPP, WAMP, and MAMP. Like Laragon, these are programs that come bundled together with the software you need to run Laravel, or really any PHP-based application. You could do raw PHP, you could do WordPress, you could do Drupal. These are not specific to Laravel. They just have the technology you need for Laravel. Now, XAMPP is cross-platform. It's going to work on Mac computers, Windows computers, even Linux computers. It comes with an Apache web server, MySQL, and PHP. There's also WAMP, which comes with the same software. It's just specific to Windows machines, and MAMP, which is specific to Mac machines. So you've got a few different options there. Of the three, I recommend XAMPP. I like that it's cross-platform, and I think there's just more resources out there if you do run into problems. I tend to find there's a lot more help on the internet when it comes to XAMPP. So with all these options laid out, let's do some summarization and recommendations on which option might be the best for you. If you're doing a lot of advanced development, you're running a lot of applications on production, and you have advanced needs for those applications, I do recommend the Homestead or Docker route. They're more complex, but they're going to give you the most control and the most consistency with how you're running your applications. For the average developer, though, I think they're overkill, and I think a program like Laravel Herd paired with something like DB Engine is a perfect solution for Mac users. And then for Windows users, I recommend the all-in-one Laragon. And I'll include links on the screen. I have guides on setting both of those programs up, so if you want to dig deeper into that, you could follow that resource. But hopefully this helped distill some of the information and make it a little less overwhelming when it comes to choosing your development environment for working in Laravel.